Imagine a village in medieval Europe. The harvest is in, the rye has been milled, and the bread is on the table, the same bread these people have eaten every day of their lives. But this year, something is wrong with the bread, and within days, the village begins to come apart. People feel a burning in their hands and feet, as if invisible fire is running under their skin. Some fall into violent convulsions, their bodies twisting in ways no one can explain. Others see things that are not there, hear voices, speak of demons and visions. And the most horrifying of all, in some victims, the fingers and toes turn black, the flesh dies while they still live, and limbs wither and drop away, painlessly, as if consumed by a slow, cold fire. To the people living through it, there was only one explanation. This was a curse. This was the work of the devil, or of witches, or the punishment of God. They could not have known the truth, because the truth was hiding in plain sight, in the one thing they trusted most. It was in the bread, and the thing in the bread was a fungus. This is the story of ergot, perhaps the single most historically important fungus that ever grew, an organism that may have fueled witch hunts, inspired centuries of terror, and eventually gave birth to one of the most famous drugs of the 20th century. This one fungus connects medieval plagues, the Salem witch trials, and a chemist's laboratory in 1938. Let me show you how. First, meet the culprit. Its name is Claviceps purpurea, and it is a fungus that infects grasses and cereal grains, above all rye. Here's how it works. When the fungus infects a head of rye, it does something quietly sinister. It attacks a developing grain, and instead of a normal golden kernel, it grows in its place a hard, dark, purple-black structure, shaped a little like a curved spur or a claw. Scientists call this structure a sclerotium. It is the fungus's survival capsule, packed with the fungus and its chemistry, sitting exactly where a healthy grain should be. And this is the heart of the tragedy. For most of human history, farmers could not reliably tell these dark ergot bodies apart from the grain. They looked like large, discolored kernels. So they were harvested along with everything else. They went into the mill and were ground up with the good rye, into the flour, and baked into the daily bread. An entire village could be poisoning itself, slice by slice, without a single person suspecting the loaf on the table. Because inside those dark sclerotia is a cocktail of powerful compounds called ergot alkaloids. And these chemicals attack the human body in two distinct and terrible ways, which is why ergotism, the disease of ergot poisoning, took two different forms. The first form is gangrenous ergotism. The alkaloids cause the blood vessels to clamp down, to constrict so violently and so persistently that blood can no longer reach the body's extremities. Starved of blood, the tissue in the fingers, the toes, the hands and feet begins to die. It blackens. And because the nerves are damaged too, the victim often feels no pain as it happens. There are accounts of people watching, in horror, as their own blackened fingers or limbs simply fell away from their bodies. Medieval Europeans gave this affliction a name that captured its burning agony. They called it St. Anthony's fire, after the saint whose monastic order ran hospitals that cared for the sufferers. The second form is convulsive ergotism, and this is where the story turns strange. The same alkaloids can mimic the signals of the brain and nervous system, and this produces violent muscle spasms, convulsions, a crawling sensation beneath the skin, and, crucially, hallucinations. Not vague confusion. Real, pharmacologically driven visions. Because hidden within ergot's chemistry is a compound called lysergic acid, and if that sounds familiar, it should. Lysergic acid is the raw material from which LSD would one day be made. In a very real sense, ergotism was an entire community suffering an uncontrolled, agonizing psychedelic experience, tangled together with searing pain and terror, and none of them had any idea why. Now think about what that would look like to people with no concept of fungal poisoning. Neighbors convulsing. Children screaming that they were being pinched and bitten by invisible things. Ordinary people seeing demons, speaking in tongues, describing the sensation of flying or of insects crawling under their skin. In a world that explained misfortune through the supernatural, there was an obvious answer waiting. witchcraft, bewitchment, the devil walking among them. The scale of these outbreaks was staggering. Records of mass ergotism appear again and again across European history. One devastating episode in France, in the year 944, is said to have killed tens of thousands of people. For century after century, whole regions would descend into this nightmare whenever the conditions were right, whenever a cool, wet season let the fungus flourish in the rye. Which brings us to the most famous theory attached to this fungus. And I want to be careful and honest here, because this is where legend and history get tangled. In the winter of 1691 and into 1692, in Salem village in Massachusetts, a group of young girls began to behave in ways no one could explain. They had fits and convulsions. They said they felt bitten and pinched by unseen forces. They described visions. The community reached for the explanation their world offered them, and the result was one of the most infamous episodes in American history, the Salem witch trials, which ended with 20 people executed. In 1976, a behavioral scientist named Linda Caporael published a striking idea. She had noticed that the symptoms described in Salem, the convulsions, the crawling skin, the hallucinations, matched the symptoms of convulsive ergotism. Salem's fields grew rye. The weather in the relevant period may have favored the fungus. And so she proposed that the Salem madness might not have been fraud or mass hysteria alone, but ergot poisoning, a fungus in the bread mistaken for the work of Satan. It is a compelling idea, and it has been repeated endlessly ever since. But I have to be truthful with you. It remains a theory, and a contested one. Many historians push back hard, pointing out that the pattern of who was afflicted and the social and political tensions of Salem don't fit a simple poisoning neatly. The honest answer is that we may never know for certain what happened in Salem, and it was almost certainly a tangle of fear, politics, belief, and possibly biology. What the ergot theory really gives us is not a solved case, but a powerful reminder that behind some of history's episodes of collective madness, there may have been a very physical, very biological cause, hiding in the food supply, unseen. And Ergot's story does not stop in the Middle Ages, because the 20th century gave it two final, extraordinary turns. The first came in 1938, in a laboratory in Switzerland. A chemist named Albert Hofmann was studying the compounds in ergot, hoping to find useful medicines. Working from that same lysergic acid at the heart of the fungus, he synthesized a new compound. He set it aside for years, and when he later encountered its effects, the world got LSD, born directly from the chemistry of the fungus that had tormented medieval villages. The very compound that made ergot's victims hallucinate had been isolated, purified, and unleashed. The second turn is quieter, but it matters just as much. Because those same violent properties, the power to constrict blood vessels and act on the nervous system, turned out to be medically useful when tamed and precisely dosed. Ergot-derived drugs have been used to stop dangerous bleeding after childbirth by contracting the muscles of the womb. And ergotamine, another compound from the fungus, became a treatment for migraine, using that same blood vessel action for good instead of harm. The curse became, in careful hands, a cure. That is the pattern this whole series keeps uncovering, and ergot may be its purest example. Here is a fungus that blackened limbs and drove villages to madness, that may have lit the fires beneath accused witches, that hid in the most ordinary food imaginable and turned it into a weapon. And that same fungus gave us medicines that save mothers' lives and ease crippling pain, and a molecule that changed 20th century culture forever. Poison and medicine, madness and discovery, all coiled together in a dark little claw of fungus growing where a grain of rye should be. The people of that medieval village never knew what was happening to them. They had no microscope, no chemistry, no way to see that their suffering came not from demons, but from a living thing too small and too ordinary to suspect. And that is maybe the most important lesson of all. Because the difference between a curse and a disease, between witchcraft and biology, was simply knowledge. The moment humanity learned to see the fungus in the grain, the curse lifted. The fires of St. Anthony went out, not through prayer, but through understanding. In the next hidden history, we leave the world of poison and madness entirely and go underground to meet what may be the largest living thing on Earth and a hidden network that connects the trees of entire forests, a kind of intelligence with no brain at all. If this journey into the secret world of fungi is fascinating you, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.